So we're looking for people to have a balance. And quite frankly, if I have to choose, I'm probably going to go with a more fluid, intelligent person than I am the crystallized knowledge. But when you bring both together, and it's, you've got the technical chops and the academic chops to understand concepts, things, technical, drill downs, if you will, then you marry that to experience. That's when you get the person that is really becomes, proficient, really proficient, and more of an expert in their field.
Can you talk about something called shiny hunters and scatter spiders, how they're joining forces?
Yeah, I think I don't explain that a bit more. I'm not sure.
I saw it from your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You did a post that said, two of the most dangerous hacker groups, shiny hunters and scatter spider, joining forces.
Right. Okay. So a little bit back to the deep, think on ransomware and this idea that you can go on the dark web. There are a bunch of groups that work together, and they're not franchises for your high school or middle school. These are formalized. I mean, I've seen certain articles and sightings of things that literally people, kind of putting on their work clothes, saying goodbye to the family and going to the office. And these are little hacker centrals. They're working for a corporation in the business of hacking. They're literally, even though they're virtual and they exist all over the world, they come together with kind of a shared purpose. And there tends to be different types, kind of three archetypes of, threat actors out there. Some are for profit. Some are for a cause, right? It's some kind of a cultural cause or to make a statement. And then some are both, just opportunist. So kind of those three archetypes. These particular groups that I referred to, they share the profit side of things, and that's what they're after. And they learn that come together with all their expertise and their different camps, their different methods of hacking. And there are a lot of methods of how to hack. They're learning to work together, so they're teaming up. It's kind of back to that a bigger version of the smaller franchise thing I was sharing.
So I'm sure it depends on the hack done, but what kind of penalties for a hacker if get caught?
So
because they can become a felony, lifetime jail, or is it a bullshit?
No, it's absolutely. In matter of fact, they're cranking down. The problem is there's so much activity that the FBI, and this is what they know, they really, I think the rest of they're only able to investigate about 2 out of 10 cases. And it has to meet the bar. So you get, a little business and they kind of, ransomware you up and they crypto your stuff and they tell you that they want you to pay $200,000 and you get down, you pay them $50,000, you get your stuff back. The FBI doesn't really care. They'll note it, they'll put it in their thing, they'll kind of watch it and see if they behave, that they can report them, but they can't. So it is a problem in terms of, getting trouble that they aren't really chasing them because they don't have the bandwidth and the capability. They're just looking for the big offenders. And so there really isn't, that's a scary part, right? They're able to crack down on it more. We'd probably be able to squelch a lot of the threats as they know there's big damage. However, at the same time, read stories about a high schooler that broke into a business or back into a high school to change his grades or whatever. I've heard you see some of those stories out there. They get in big trouble. So you never know. But right now, I think that the way that the landscape is, the threat landscape is so, vast and so common that you can't really track down. If you do in fact get caught, you're breaking all kinds. You're breaking federal laws. You're breaking state laws. There are certain level raises the level of crime depending on how much money you've ransomware or data you've stolen or whatever. Of course, if it's more of a regulated environment, then they're breaking all kinds of regulatory laws. So there's big trouble. People are in jail for years and years for hacking.
What if someone from a foreign country? Do we have any jurisdictions like some Thailand, Ukraine, Russia, Poland, Vietnam? Does the FBI really do anything then?
Yeah, so they were that poll. They have divisions on that. I'm not really an expert in this field. I have studied kind of geopolitical implications, if you will, of cyber threats because they're relevant to the stuff that we do. But we don't do a lot of national type stuff. Yes, they do. There are agencies and divisions that most countries have set up that will work collaboratively with the FBI, and they will help try to nail down where the hacker being so smart, the IP addresses ultimately they're trying to get, or some kind of a latent piece of data that they left somewhere that they can trace and track to try to nail the threat actor.
For lack of a better term, is there a country out there that's known as the hacker mecca, where we all top hackers are in this one location?
So honestly, be a little careful, but I think Russia, Ukraine, and China are the big offenders. There are some other countries that play into that as well, but that's generally your biggest, because they don't really police it within the country at the level that they should.
Okay, it's kind of like a 3-part question. So who's your preferred customer? How you market to them, and then why should they choose you?
Yeah, great. I can trade a sales pitch. I think a lot of what we talked about today, I think our history of thought leadership and best practices are really relevant. We're following some of the tip of the spear solutions that we're delivering that you can't just find a lot of MSP companies, and a lot of that comes back to following really lead with what we call a zero trust methodology. Zero trust has been around for a long time. But what it really is, it's layers. You're approaching all of your cybersecurity methods and ability to defend the bad actors in layers. So we look at every particular element of the network. And zero trust, there are actually 7 pillars of the layers of the network. It's not really the OSI model per se, but they're looking at layers in the network, like identity access management is a layer. how are people authenticating? We're talking about with MFA and making sure that you've got role-based access, ROC, and all those things. But then down in the deeper part of the layers that get a little complicated is microsegmentation. Actually, before I talk about microsegmentation, one of the principles, prerequisites, or assumed elements of zero trust is assumed breach. And we see that because the big companies like the casinos and different things we see, some of these that are out there, they have like the latest and greatest tools. They have the best. They've hired the $500,000 smartest guys, and yet we still see them getting hacked. So assuming breach is a pretty safe thing, right? It's like, wow, all that and all the tools, and they still somehow got hacked. And then you see it, you read about it, commonly. It's a common thing. So the point is that we have to assume breach. And for, a lot of the medium-sized enterprise that we work with, we need to make sure that you have backups, Bob and IT, Aaron and IT, so we have backups. But do you really have backups? And we care less about backup, more about restoration. That's not even good enough. Backing up in the ability to store, yay, we're streaming it to a cloud. We're good. It's off-site. Not good enough. We have to go much deeper, and we start with that. Number one, the backups need to be immutable, meaning that they cannot be traced or touched from your network. They have to have a completely separate access to get to the backups. Some people call that air-gapped, complete air gap from your network. The reason is that in most ransomware cases, they will breach their patient. They'll wait months, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then they'll watch during that time, and they'll see that you're streaming them to a cloud, but they're not maybe encrypted. And so they'll go to the encryption point, wherever it is, the data point they're streaming to, we can have access to your network because they've already breached it, and they'll encrypt them there. So a lot of the cases out there, people with ransomware, like they're thinking, no, not a big deal. We got those backups, right, Bob? And Bob's like, yeah, we got the backups. So they go to the backups, and they got the same message there. They're encrypted as well. They're nothing they can do. So they're compromised completely, and they have to then negotiate with the threat actors. And so that's a big deal. Another side note, by the way, not to get on a tangent, but one of the big things out there to get into PQC, which is post-quantum computing, one of the big deals with that, as that becomes available, the quantum computing to the threat actors, their ability to hack what we would call our standard, run-of-the-mill, business grade, whatever you want to call it, cryptography, which is called 512 or 256-bit encryption. They can hack that in a matter of days with quantum computers. So data harvesting is really popular. So even when they get to the encrypted backups, not to scare people, but they get there, it's like, we're doing all good stuff, encrypted backups, but then they can harvest that, and they're going to sit on it for a while, because there'll still be data that's sitting in those encrypted backups. And when these quantum computers become available, because they're smart, they're in advance, they've got a business plan, they'll be able to go back through all the data and de-encrypt it. And whatever might be living there, if you don't have basically post-quantum cryptography, which will defend against those things, you're in trouble. And we're going to see, as I talked about in this session, the escalation of technology, how fast things evolve. I told you that's 10 years away. I'd have probably said that 4 years ago. Now I say, people say, that's still for 5 years away. I don't know. I think there's an initiative out there by like NIST, the National Institute of Standards, security standards, saying that by 2030, all the financial services and the government agencies need to have post-quantum cryptography in place. So it's coming, and it's coming faster than people think. Back to zero trust, back to immutable backups. The next piece is beyond that in this assumed breach is that we then have to know what we call RPO and RTO, more acronyms in the world. What is the point in time we want to recover to? In other words, when did we last snapshot or back that up? 4 hours? 8 hours? Every day? Once a week? We want to know what that is. What can our business live with? Then we need to think about the RTO, which is the recovery time objective. So we're going, how long is it going to take me to get back to that point where we took the last backup? So we need to think that through, and where's that going to be stood up if your systems are hacked? Or if we're still, one of the things that's really important if you do get hacked, and this is a kind of an alert for everybody, a lot of people are quick IT people start throwing and erasing stuff and redoing stuff and formatting stuff. You really want to collect that evidence. That's really important. You don't want to, forensics there. So you don't want to be too quick. You want to capture it in the state that it's in the hack state, because that really helps provide data to prevent future failures or future hacks. It also helps altruistically of people that may be hacked by that group or the method. Anyway, without getting too, I'm getting in pretty deep here, but back to zero trust and leave those layers. And so the assumed breach is really important. And that's a big head up to your listenership if you're out there and you really think you've been told your backup are good. I challenge you. The other thing that people think about, business owners, a little bit is like, hey, we're paying quite a bit for cyber insurance these days. We're good and think, well, at least I got insurance. Well, guess what? 44% of all cybersecurity claims in 2024 denied. They're getting smart. They're fine print, as insurance companies do. If you're not doing managed detection response, active detection and active, cybersecurity methods on your network, they will pay. And so they're learning, the fine print really matters. And I think a lot of businesses are none of that. So reviewing your cybersecurity insurance and knowing what it says you need to have in place, that's a really important piece too. But to get back now, all the way kind of backtracking to microsegmentation is part of your trust, the methodology that we start with companies, help them. We look at it through that lens, and we really look at it pragmatically, kind of layer by layer. You can't eat an elephant. You have to do one bite at a time. So we look at the common, practical, most defensible things we can put in place right away. So again, good backups, and then we go to good identity and access management. So we know that you've got good authentication, because email is our biggest threat. We know that 75 to 80% of all breaches start through a user. They are the new endpoint. They are the weakness. They're socially engineered. They click on their email. So we look at all those practices. But as we start to mature, we want to go deep into the layers.